Recording in progress. All right. Oh, and she dropped off. Okay, so so it looks like it's just us. So welcome everybody officially. I realized that I didn't introduce myself. I'm Flannery Winchester. I'm CCL's communications director, um, and so we've already sort of done introductions. If this new person signing in gets connected to audio, we'll ask her to introduce herself as well. Um, but thank you guys so much for being here. And one thing that I would like to know that we haven't already said is who is a media manager and who is a group leader. Because one thing that I'm finding is that there's actually a lot of group leaders out there who are handling the media work, and so I do want to understand who I'm talking to. If you guys are chapter leaders or have other roles within the chapter, or if you are specifically focused on media. So Mary, do you want to start, and then we can go to Laurel, and then we can go to M, who just joined us?
Yes, I am the Missoula chapter leader, and I kind of jumped in to start our press media writing team, Montana group, because I wanted to see that group get going. But I'm trying to ease out of that. I think I have a co-leader, and then we're trying to find another co-leader.
Gotcha.
But
okay.
so it's not, we've divided up our media into social media and press media.
Okay, that's smart because they're very different efforts. So that makes sense to have folks focused in different areas. Okay, great. Thank you for being here. And then Laurel, did you hear the prompt? Sorry, I didn't know.
I did. Okay. Yeah, sorry, I had to get settled on the treadmill. So I am a volunteer and not a leader or of any media or chapter. And I work on a team that is the Media Montana with Mary, and also the social media and the letter to the editor team.
Okay, so there's an LTE team that's separate from the media team you're describing, like
the press media team is a fairly new statewide team, and it's ideally will be composed of regional letter writing teams, LTE teams. So the most active group that we have right now is in the Flathead area, and Laurel's part of that group. But the press media team is an umbrella group with all the LTE groups.
Got it. Okay, so
ideally that's what it's going to look like at some point.
Okay, so the main focus is writing LTEs and submitting them to the various papers across the
Yes, and we're also focused on trying to extend our outreach. With the Flathead group has done a phenomenal job of getting letters to the editor published in the Missoulian, for example, and some of the other larger town newspapers, and we're trying to figure out how to get letters out to some of the smaller town newspapers. So
okay, great. And if you hear me typing, I'm just taking notes because this is all so good to know. Okay, great. And then M, hi, thank you for joining us. Do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us what chapter you're from, and
sure.
Any official roles you have with that chapter, media manager or group leader?
Sure. You probably don't remember. We actually had a phone call just before the pandemic hit when I first joined the show. So my name's Michelle Hamilton, and I'm in the Reno chapter. And
yes,
I'm now.
Yes, I do remember you. I remember our phone call. I remember your spreadsheet. I was impressed by your spreadsheet. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Well, I've gotten a lot of inspiration from all the training and the meetings, so those have been tremendously helpful. And our media work here in Northern Nevada has definitely taken off as a result of that. So I'm one of the group leaders of the Reno Sparks chapter now, and I am also on the social media team, which, as you suggested, we've really worked hard to explain to people that they are very different things. And I'm also coordinating with the chapter over in Carson City. So we have an op-ed writers group that is composed of people in Northern Nevada from both chapters. And then I also work to coordinate with the Las Vegas chapter because, you know, even though they're 7 hours away from us by car, it's obviously the largest city in Nevada and has two of the most important papers in the state. So that's my role.
That's fantastic. So you're doing some statewide media organizing then, getting everybody pulling people in the right direction.
Yeah, kind of. And I'm thrilled to say that we had another letter to the editor published. So I'm super excited. And we got our second op-ed ever published from the Reno Gazette Journal last Sunday. And the Reno Gazette Journal was number 3 in terms of circulation in the state. So we were like over the moon.
Oh, that's fantastic. Oh, great work. Okay. This is very exciting. Let me write that down. I'll go, if you want to send me a link to that, we can share that on social media from CCL's national social.
I can, although the RGJ has a really kludgy website, and so you can share it. Like, there's no picture that comes up. It's just the link, and it's kind of lame, but I'd be happy to send it to you.
Well, send it to me and we'll figure out some way we can use it that's not lame. Like maybe we can plug it into the weekly briefing and say like, oh, here's a great example of media work from our Nevada chapter, and you know, plug it some other way, celebrate the success. Okay.
So I'm also multitasking. So I'm listening and will definitely participate, but I may turn my camera off so that you won't see me working in the kitchen.
Yes, anybody welcome to go off camera at any time. It's totally fine. Okay, great. Well, so thank you everybody for orienting me a little bit to your contexts. So the way I usually like to do these calls is give an overview of the current media opportunities, things that are most relevant to be thinking about right now in relation to what's sort of going on nationally. And then I also have a quick survey that I'll share with y'all that you don't have to do right now. You can just sort of pull it up and you can look at it after the call if you want. It's about 5 questions that is basically just trying to help me get a sense of our media activities right now. What do you like to do? What do you have fun doing? What do you enjoy? What are you interested in? Versus what seems hard, or what have you tried and didn't like, or what weren't able to be successful with, so you're not into it, or you know, just kind of sharing with me where you're at with the different media opportunities that we offer. And then also any thoughts that you have about the resources that we have available now, if there's anything that you find particularly helpful, or if there's something that you find yourself thinking, oh, it'd be really great if they could give us this, or if we could have more of, you know, this. This is just a place to sort of give feedback to me and my team so that we can help you guys better, help us help you. So actually I'll just go ahead and drop that that survey link in the chat so you can have that. And then I'll talk you through the current media opportunities. So the main thing in my view is that the CCL conference is this weekend, our big June conference, and then the week after that, and probably into the week after that, is sort of our lobbying push, our June lobbying push, which typically would happen on Capitol Hill all in one day. You know, we would swarm the Hill on a Tuesday and we'd have 515 meetings all on one day. But now that they're virtual, it's, you know, there's a little bit of a longer tail. So this month, there's a lot of lobbying going on. And so I think that one of the best things that you could be doing right now is to send a media advisory to your local press contacts about that going on and the folks in your chapter or your state participating in that. And so I can actually show you, let me just share my screen and show you what this is. So we have a page on CCL community, and I understand that there's a lot of information on community, so I won't send you through the sort of path of the navigation and all that. You can just go into the search bar and type in local press templates or press release templates or press releases or something like that, whatever phrase you can remember, and it should pull up this local press release templates page. And if you go into it, there's a few, you can always find the most timely resources right here. I'm updating these regularly. And so the one that I recommend you grab now is this press advisory template about CCL June conference and lobbying. So you can just download that file. And I'll have to stop share and reshare to open this up in a different place, but let me show you what it looks like when I pull it up. So this is what that will pull up for you, is this document. It's basically something that you can send to press. It's pretty much ready to be sent. You just need to fill in this local, the local information. So you drop in, you say CCL will host the Push for a Price on Carbon, a virtual conference for climate advocates across the country. At least 12 climate concerned locals from Missoula are planning to attend, like something like that. You kind of drop in those local details so that your local press contacts understand how your community relates to this national event. And there's a couple places like that throughout the advisory. So that's really the top line thing that I would say you could be doing right now, is just thinking what contacts, both at newspapers, but also TV stations, radio stations, might be interested in the fact that this is happening and that you in your chapter are participating in it. So that's kind of the headline thing. You could also have anyone in your chapter writing letters about the conference and just saying like, wow, there's this big thing going on that I'm part of, and here's what I learned, that there's this policy out there that can reduce emissions super quickly, and it would help Montana in this, X, Y, and Z ways. And so that type of message is appropriate over the next couple of weeks. Since the conference is happening on Saturday, it would probably be more of an after the fact, like I just went to this conference and learned this. And that will help just reinforce the message that there's grassroots appetite for climate action and that sort of thing. So letters are always a great thing to be working on, and that's an available hook right now. And then and we do have a resource on community called LTE Topics that is, again, like regularly updated with stuff that you can be thinking about for letters. But those are really the main things. And then there's an op-ed template called about why carbon pricing, which kind of makes a general argument for why carbon pricing, and walks through the benefits. And so that, I think that's actually mentioned in the June action sheet as something that's out there and available to submit. But same thing like the press template, it has spots where you can add in local details, and you can send that off to be published. If you don't have a lot of writing bandwidth, that's a good option to use to still get something published without having to create it from whole cloth. So those are the things that I would flag right now as opportunities. And then beyond that, I usually save the rest of these calls for open Q&A so we can talk about any of those opportunities. We can talk about things that y'all are working on specifically in your chapters, or any questions that you have about anything media related. So there's my little spiel. And I'll turn it over to y'all for questions.
I have a quick question, which is, the LTE writing tool that CCL has, where you can go in and use it, and you can select it. Are all of you familiar with the writing tool?
I can show you.
Yeah, and I'll let Flannery find it, but it's really great because you put in your name, you populate it with your name and where you live, and then it lists the local publications that are in your area. So there, yeah, it's the link to the writing tool.
Yeah, so I'll just show you here. If you're on that LTE topics resource that I mentioned, or I think we also linked to it from the LTE training. But here is this this LTE tool. So I guess you could also get to it from this tools menu up above. But basically, it has my address in here already, so it knows where I am, and then it pulls in papers in my area. So you can select, like you can put your letter in here, subject letter to the editor, and you can send it off to as many of those as you want to through this tool. So that's one way to expand your reach. I mean, the tough thing about that is that we usually advise that when you write a letter to the editor, you respond to something that was published in the newspaper. That's one of the best ways to get published. And so so you don't necessarily want to blast the same thing out to a whole bunch of newspapers unless it's broadly relevant. But that tool is great for finding those other papers, you know, stuff that you may have smaller circulation or may not be right in your area or something that you were aware of. You can look and see what that tool will pull in. And then you can go look at their website and see see what they're publishing, see their submission guidelines, that sort of thing. So so that's how I think the tool is most useful. But if you do have an LTE that's more generally responding to something general, like if you want to write a letter about the drought in the West or something like that, like you could send that to everybody and just see what you get.
Flannery, I have a question. If I sent you the names of some other newspapers in our area, could you add them to that tool?
So Todd Elvins works with some
That would be a software thing.
Yeah, that maintains the tool. So I think that he could, if they're not on there, he could probably reach out to that person and flag it and say these need to be added to the tool.
Okay.
Because I know in the past he's reached out and said, like, this paper is no longer accepting any LTEs, so take them off or something like that. So we should work in the other direction too.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
The other question I had was, I know in some cases papers are like, and maybe this is just for op-eds and not letters to the editor, but as far as, exclusivity for certain papers to print. And I know I years ago we talked about this, and I just wanted to be sure. Are you okay with selecting? It sounds like it's okay to select multiple papers and submit a letter to the editor and not feel like we're stepping on any toes in regards to exclusivity.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would not worry about exclusivity for a letter because it's a shorter piece and the papers are often running, multiple letters all on the same page. Exclusivity is not typically a concern. If you are worried about it, or you just like really want to cover your bases, you could look at the websites of those papers and confirm their submission requirements, and some of them might specify. And if they do, you could be thoughtful about that. But generally, I wouldn't worry about it for letters and would be more careful about it with op-eds.
Thank you.
Sure. And that's one of the reasons why I'm sure you will have noticed the op-ed templates that we put out from National that have a double byline where it's local volunteer and Mark Reynolds. The reason that we do that is because if someone is looking at a piece, looking across, maybe they're Googling the headline or something like that, if they see that piece pop up in multiple places with different names on it, but like mostly saying the same thing, that doesn't look so good. and so we have it be a double byline so that it's clear that the repeated stuff is coming from a national source and the local stuff is coming from a unique local source. And so we're acknowledging that, yes, there's a relationship here between the members of this organization who are in different places and who are putting out a message, just so that is clearer and doesn't raise those flags of like, hang on, how are all these different people saying the same kind of stuff and kind of looking weird? It's because we're all part of CCL, and so we put that a little more front and center.
Thank you.
Sure.
I just have a comment on those templates and our experience with them.
Oh yeah, please.
We nearly always send them out. And what I found is that with one volunteer in particular who was really interested in doing writing, but was a little intimidated about the idea of writing a piece so long, that those templates were actually a really good on-ramp for her, and really empowering too, to be able to put something like that together and send it out, you know, to feel like she's doing something substantial. So I think those templates are great, and I'm really glad you guys are doing them. And I was actually floored in April, because I didn't think the Reno Gazette would ever publish one of those op-ed templates, but they actually did, and they put their own headline on top of it. I can't remember what it was, but it was just, you know, Representative Amadei needs to do this, and it was just fantastic. I know. So, so thank you for that. Thank you for helping us be successful.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, I'm glad to hear it. I mean, that's part of the idea of the templates, is so that it's an op-ed is not so intimidating. Like, you can kind of see what the end product is. You can be part of making it relevant for your area, but you don't have to like stare at a blank page and a blinking cursor and go, oh my God, I have to write 700 words. Because that's not easy. So so good. I'm glad that you found it helpful.
This is a good reminder, Flannery. I forget, there's so many tools, but the press release, I had never really connected with that or even realized that was there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking out loud, Laurel, we could potentially maybe send an invitation to our at-large members for a letter to the editor workshop, and just to introduce them to these tools.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, that's especially for people in rural areas, the at-large folks. Media stuff is a really good thing for them to do, because a lot of it can happen individually, or they may be in areas where they're, you know, they're one of the few who knows their media stuff in that particular spot, and they can work on that. But yeah, Mary, I'm not surprised to hear you say that the press releases are sort of new in your awareness, because it hasn't been that long that we've really put an emphasis on this, and I'll tell you why that is because things have changed so much in the last few years. The context of our work has really dramatically shifted. So I started off as a volunteer with CCL in 2015, and came on staff in 2017. And at that time, there was very little conversation about climate change at the national level, period, much less about carbon pricing. Like, it just wasn't, nothing much was really going on. And so historically within CCL, the media focus has been on owning the opinion pages, because that was the only place that we could make sure for ourselves that we showed up. And so that was, you know, it was letters, and it was op-eds, and it was meeting with the editorial boards to try to get an editorial. But then over the last few years, I mean, you guys have seen it. The public awareness about climate change has exploded. There's been so much more talk at the national level about it, and to the point where it was a, you know, huge feature in the presidential election. Congress talking about it constantly. Like, so what that changes in terms of media work is that our advocacy on this issue is a news story. It's newsworthy now in a way that it wasn't a handful of years ago. And so now you actually can reach out to a reporter and say, hey, this big national topic that everybody's thinking about and that we know is going to affect every part of America. Well, we are trying to do something about it, and we're to our senators, and we're, and like that's worth covering now. It fits into the stream of that story. So we used to just offer press releases a couple times a year, like basically around the June conference and the November conference, when people would be traveling to DC, and that was worth a story. But now we, as you can see from that page, we have several templates available, and we've been offering them more often because of this newsworthiness. And it seems, from what I can tell from the stats of like what's coming through the field reports and the action tracker from chapters, is that over the last few years they have been able to be more successful with articles and TV and radio because the context has changed so much. And so it wasn't until actually last spring. So I think we might have done it in April, which is just a terrible time, April 2020, a terrible time to introduce new information to people or new trainings or anything. But we did a training about generating news coverage and sort of how to go about using these press releases, and how to think about your local media list, like building out your list of journalists that you may want to talk to, who's, thinking about who's on the environment beat, who's on the congressional beat, things like that. And so that training has not been out there very long comparatively in the life of CCL. And so that is definitely something that I'm still trying to help volunteers understand as a way to engage with the media and answer questions around that. So yeah.
Question. So you mentioned, would a press release be a loggable action on the action tracker?
So actually, there's not a place to just say that you sent out a press release, and we probably should change that. I can talk to IT because it is, I do want you to be able to record your input and your efforts, but right now you would have to use just a generic action report for that.
Okay.
But then if you are able to generate an article or a TV coverage or a radio story or something like that, there are unique places for that in the action tracker.
Sure. I'm just thinking in the context of what you're saying about how the whole environment has changed, it might be nice to have a press release option.
Yeah, well, and I think that would reinforce what I'm trying to let people know about, which is that sending a press release to a reporter is a worthwhile task, and if it's not even listed on the options, then that makes that harder. So yeah, and even the action tracker was only recently revamped, so that needs tweaks too. So I think that that is sort of on my radar to adjust. The one thing I want to be careful with is that, like, I don't want people to just send out press releases to anybody, like, indiscriminately. Like, I do want people to understand how to like, I don't want people to be discouraged by sending them like all the time, but maybe to the wrong people, and then not hearing back, and then going, oh, well, that was a waste of time. Why am I sending out these press releases? I'm not hearing anything. It's like, so I mean, that's on me to figure out,
How would you manage that, Flannery?
Well, I guess I wonder if having like send a press release as an action, I wonder if that would lead people to just like download it and email it to the, to news@themissoulian.com, but maybe that's not really the best way to go about it.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. If it was a loggable action, you'd want to have some guidelines about that it needs to be run by a state coordinator or at minimum a chapter leader. I don't think you want individuals just sending out press release. It would have to have some kind of confirmation process, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I'm less worried about like quality control and more just about the volunteer experience, which is just that I wouldn't want people to like try it over and over without maybe having watched the training or like understand really what's the goal. Because the thing is, so like the goal really is to generate news coverage, and sending a press release is one way that you can do that, but it's not the only way that you can do that.
Yeah.
So because you could, so let's imagine that you have built out your local press list, and so you know who the journalists are that you want to be targeting. You could send them a press release, but you could also just send them a personal email and say, you know, hi, I'm part of this group that's doing this thing. I thought that you might be interested in this. Let me know if you want to talk about this. Or you could follow that reporter on Twitter, and if they post something about climate change, you could say, oh, I totally agree. I'm part of this local group in Montana that does this. Let me know if you ever want to talk, you know? So like, so there's different ways that you can go about trying to get to the ultimate goal, which is generate the news coverage. So I guess that's a better way of saying that what I really want volunteers' focus to be on in this area is that goal, rather than like a tactic that can get you there.
Mhm.
You know, so it's good to send out a press release, but we don't have to get like tunnel vision on this is the only way we can talk to a reporter, or this is the only option available to me, or whatever, because really engaging with reporters can feel more like grass tops outreach, where you're trying to, you know, build a relationship, you're trying to make a connection, you're trying to think, maybe before you even reach out, you think, is there anybody in our chapter who knows this person, knows some circle that this person is in? Like, how could we make a genuine connection with this person and get, you know, maybe then we have a coffee and just talk about what the chapter does, let them know we're here to answer any questions they may have about environmental stories in general. We can try to point them to the right people in town. Like, you know, there's all, it's a lot more kind of relationship building and grass tops feeling, or endorsement type of work, than just like submitting an op-ed or submitting a letter.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but there's layers to it. Don't let me scare you off by.
Yeah, well, no, that's a great way to think about it. And I hadn't really thought about it in that way. So that's helpful.
Do you know where the action on the action tracker, that how to report a generic action? Just, do you know that there's a little, you know where that is? Okay. Just thought I'd check.
That's good.
If I could just share a story on that topic, because that was actually one of the first trainings that I did, was the training that you have out there, Flannery, about press releases. And it's something that I did in my old world. So I have some familiarity with it. And what I always tell our chapter members when I send out one of those press templates is that I don't really expect it to get published, but what I am trying to do is establish a relationship with the paper to let them know that we're here, we're not going anywhere, we've been here for a while, you know, we're passionate about this subject, we're lobbying, we're not fly-by-night, and hopefully someday when they want to write a story about carbon pricing, they'll remember all those press releases that I sent, and I'll pick up the phone. You know, they'll pick up the phone and call me, because we do all the other things like following them on Twitter, and if they've got a good story out there that's climate related, then we'll retweet or quote tweet. And one of the ways that that's I don't want to say paid off, because, you know, since I'm in Reno, it sounds like this is a game and I'm gambling, and that's not really what this is about, right? But one of the successes that we've had is there is an online paper in Nevada, the Nevada Independent, which is really well regarded and has really broad circulation, although you can't really compare it to a print edition, right? And they have one of the best reporters in the state on the environment beat. So I started sending him the press releases, and, you know, I always include a cover that basically says, loved your piece about blah, blah, and, you know, this is what we're seeing, and basically letting him know that I'm not just spamming him, I'm actually paying attention to what he's writing about. And then he started replying. And I was like, I can't believe I'm getting an email. And so that was really cool. And before the current Nevada legislative session kicked in, we actually had a phone call. You know, he wanted to interview me, and that gave me an opportunity to really find out, like, what is it that is of interest to him. Because the Nevada Independent is hyper-focused on state issues. They do some reporting at the national level, but it's really about what's happening at the state level, and it's one of the best as a result of that. And it turns out that what he's really interested in was, how do grassroots operations work, especially in the time of a pandemic? And so that gave me a really good piece of information that I could then use in my next email with him. Then, you know, the emails that I was sending him specifically addressed those things that I knew that he was interested in, you know. And the last one was actually with regards to the March lobby days. Perfect, right? These are all the endorsements that we got. We're actually sitting down and meeting with our senators. This is what we do in terms of trying to do outreach to the community. And he's replying to me. So, I mean, I don't know where it's going to go, but it feels like I'm doing something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. And I'm so glad you raised that, because that's another thing that people should understand, is that sending out press releases, you're right, it's not common that it, you know, that it immediately gets picked up, or that you get a ton of response, or that's just not really how it works, because reporters get press releases from tons of sources all the time about all sorts of stuff. And so but it is good to stay on their radar, to show that they're, you know, you're a group that exists, that knows about this stuff, that can offer certain things. And Michelle's exactly right. It's like, when they come around to a story that it might be a fit, they'll go, oh, wasn't there like a carbon pricing group or something that emailed me one time? Let me go look at that. And that, you know, and they might dig it up. And if you've sent them stuff periodically every couple of months, like, then they'll have lots of options to choose from, and we'll hopefully reach out. And so, but yeah, that's fantastic, Michelle, that he's getting back to you. And and that's another thing that you raised that I am glad that you said, that asking the reporter, what are you most interested in writing about? How can I, you know, what are you looking for? How can I sort of help you, because I'm plugged in this area of the community and in this topic area? What can I send you that would be helpful? Because, and in this way, reporter relationships are like lobby meetings, right? You want to ask your member of Congress, like, what are your priorities? What are you focused on? And you can ask the same thing of a reporter, and they will tell you what they're focused on, what they're writing about, what stories they might have in mind, but they're not sure how to approach. And then you can see how you might fit in, or how someone from your chapter might have some of the answers they're looking for, or if you know someone in the community from another organization, or, you know, something else, where you could just point them in the right direction. And that's super useful too, because anytime you can be a resource for a member of the media, rather than just always saying, hey, write about me, they will appreciate that. And then it gives you more opportunities to talk with them, because then they might reach out and say, hey, do you guys have an opinion on this, you know, dam removal? Or do you have an opinion on this, you know, whatever regulation the city's going to do about pesticides? Or, you know, and then you're just talking to them more, and you can point them in the right direction and build that relationship, so that when they do want to cover your stuff, or you do have something going on, it's more likely that they'll cover it. So, yeah. And so if you haven't, Mary, if you haven't seen that training about generating news coverage, that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
And I've referenced it a couple times, but having a sense of your local press list of, like, who are the journalists in your area that you might want to reach out to, that's a great place to start. It's just a little bit of research about who's writing about the environment, who's writing about politics, even sometimes who's writing about, like, community issues, or like who does human interest stories and might do a profile on, like, your chapter leader, or like a, working mom in your chapter who makes time, she's got a job and 2 kids, but she still makes time to talk to Congress, things like that. You can kind of,
We have one of those.
yeah. So you can think about, based on what stories you're seeing come out, you can think about who might be a fit. And it doesn't have to be a super long list either. It can be a list of 5 or 10 people to start out with, and you can follow them on social media. You can get their email addresses, you can get their phone numbers, and so you can make sure that you, when you do send something out, you follow up and try to connect with them, and just stay in touch on sort of a regular cadence, and see what doors that opens up.
Yeah. What was the name of that training, Flannery?
It's called Generating News Coverage. Hang on, let me grab the link for you. It is right here. There we go.
Thank you.
Sure.
I will definitely look at that.
Cool. Yeah. And if you still have questions after watching that, then please do email me and let me know, because because I want to answer your questions, but also because, as I mentioned, that training is still relatively new. And so I plan to, we try to refresh the trainings periodically. And so if there are things that you're wondering about that weren't covered in that training, then we can fit them into the next version of the training, so that we're, other people who have those questions get them answered right off the bat.
Great.
Cool. And I'll also just clarify one little thing as you think about talking to reporters, that this is hard to tell sometimes from the outside of a publication, but the news side of a publication and the opinion side are usually totally separate. So even if a paper has been publishing your letters, or maybe you've talked to the opinion editor, they will almost certainly not be the people who are writing the articles, and they may not even have relationships with those people, depending on the size of the outlet. If it's like a really small rural paper, then they probably know them and maybe they could connect you. But generally, those two parts of a news outlet are pretty separate. And so you want to, if you're looking for an article, you want to be talking to the reporter. If you're looking for the opinion pages, you want to be talking to an editor, or the submission stuff for the letters and that sort of thing. So those are separate. Sometimes people have questions about that. They're like, well, they always publish my op-eds. Why did this reporter not talk to me? And I'm like, because they not doing the same thing at all. So it's good to know going in, so that you don't, it's just good to know. Anything else?
I don't think I have any questions, but I'm very happy about the information that you're sharing. I wouldn't have even thought to ask questions about some of these things. So thank you so much.
Cool, sure. I have a question for you guys. Oh, sorry, Michelle, were you about to say something?
Oh, I was going to say it's really nice to connect with other people who are doing this work. So thank you for hosting this.
Sure. Yeah, and not just other people, but other people right in your very own region, your neighbors.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, my pleasure to hold this space for us all. I have a question for y'all. Since you're doing so much letter writing work, I'm curious about if you've seen any change over the course of when you've been doing this, in your paper's frequency of publishing letters, or the space they devote to letters. Are you, how's it going with getting letters published? Because I know that something that's happening periodically, across with newspapers across the country, is they're often devoting less space to letters, or they're publishing them less often, like only on certain days, or and I'm just curious if that's anything that you guys are running into in your area.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing that at the RGJ. A year ago, they were publishing the letters on Sunday and on Wednesday. And just in the last month or so, they're only publishing on Wednesdays. Yeah, so, the number of opportunities has gone down by half. But I would say that, at least if I compare it to last year, and it's probably too soon to tell because this just changed in terms of the amount of space available. But so far, we're getting as many published this year as we did last year. And I think, honestly, it's because in the past, and I wasn't here at the time and I don't know the details, but the chapter was accused that they were spamming the paper. And I think we got a bad rap for a while. But now we work really hard to respond to stuff that they like. And they're publishing us. So, and as I said before, we actually have had 2 op-eds published this year, which was an absolute first for us. So.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
They're really struggling, just like all the other media outlets. I mean, they're losing people, and it's rough.
Sure. That's another benefit of us, submitting things that are relevant and interesting and, well written, that don't need a bunch of heavy editing, because then that's content they can use without a whole bunch of extra staff time. Sadly, that's the state we're in. Yeah, so that's interesting. I'm glad to hear that you're able to still publish things successfully, even though the letters in particular, even though the space is limited. And that's another reason that I am interested in this sort of building our capacity in the what's called the earned media side of things, the articles, TV, radio, because as the opinion pages shrink, we still got to get our message out there. We still want our activities to be covered in the media, and so if there's less space in the opinion pages to work with, then we can go over to the news side and still have success, because they are still generating stuff over there. So that's another benefit. If you are finding those limitations, then there's go chat with a reporter. How about you guys, Laurel?
The Missoulian is the largest circulation paper in my area, and we seem to get whatever we submit, as far as I can tell, gets printed. They have an opinion letter to the editor page every day except Saturday.
Oh, okay, that's great.
So, Laurel, Laurel, who's up in the Flathead area, they have published, the Missoulian seems to publish your letters quite regularly.
Yeah, which is really nice. And then we have small papers in our region of Flathead Valley, 2 main ones. One is very conservative. They kind of don't publish anything hardly that we send them. That being said, when I look at how many times I've submitted to the Missoulian, it's like 4 times as much as I submit to the Daily Interlake. And then there is another liberal paper that popped up a few years ago in our region. And so I think I haven't been in it long enough to see the trends that you're asking about. And I also don't read the paper. I just write. So that is makes it hard for me to know.
Yeah, well, that's another thing. I mean, when I started as a volunteer and I was offered letters to the editor as something I could do, I was like, you mean I have to subscribe to the newspaper? So it's that actually, and that's something to think about as you have like new people joining, is we often present letters as like the easiest or the first media activity for people to do, but that may not necessarily be true if someone is not a newspaper reader or a newspaper subscriber. Letters might then be the hardest thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
It might be easier for that person to reach out to a journalist or to follow that journalist on Twitter, or to, those might be lower barrier to entry activities than letter writing. Yeah, let me ask you. So, and I'm cognizant of time too. We'll wrap up here in the next few minutes. But um, the so you mentioned that you have a conservative paper in the area. Would it be? Have you seen the LTE topics resource that we provide? Have you ever looked at that? This is not a test. It's okay if you haven't. If you it's not
Well, I mean, I think you just showed it to us. Is that the one with like the press release? Or no, that was
that's
new.
that's the press releases, but there's actually a resource that we have that's just like if someone's looking for something to write a letter about, they could just pull it up and it's sort of topical things. So right now, the things at the top of that document are this op-ed that came out from Utah about the Republicans, so it's like, hey, this cool thing happened. You could write about this in your area and call on your state's Republicans to say something similar. And then there's a topic about like, hey, drought in the West is a big thing. You could write about this now. And then there's also a topic about hurricane season in the, East Coast and Southeast. It's like it's getting underway earlier than usual. And so it's trying to be broadly helpful for people that are just looking for a place to start with letters. But the reason I ask is because it's not organized right now by like political leaning. And I wonder if it would be helpful to add to that resource something that says like, if you have a newspaper or if you're in an area that has a particularly conservative focus or conservative audience for the media, here are some topics that you might want to write on that would be appropriate for that. Like maybe that would be useful.
I think that would be really helpful for rural Western states, for sure. I mean, we do have a cool system with the team leader who she and her and other people on the team are like the gleaners for the hooks. So they do the reading and then they just send us an email with screenshots. Here's does anyone want to write about this? So
good. That is,
it's good. Yeah, it's easy.
Awesome. That's so good. Yeah, that's something that actually we say, I think in the most updated version of the LTE training, we say like put together a team, have people who just scan through and then tell everybody else. So that's great. Awesome. All right, well, we are at the bottom of the hour. I know we got started a little bit late, but do you have anything else pressing that you want to ask about while we're all together, or anything else that's occurred to you here at the end? You good, Michelle?
I just wanted to say thank you again, Flannery, for this time. And very helpful and lots of things to think about.
Sure.
So,
well, yeah, it's my pleasure. I mean, we do. We are working on expanding the comm staff so that we can give y'all more support like this more regularly. So I'm glad to be able to do it. I hope to be able to do it more. And I'm here if you have questions. And then we also on CCL Community have the site-wide forums for each of the levers. So there's like a lobbying forum and a grassroots forum, and there's a media forum. So if you ever have questions like what we're talking about here tonight, you're welcome to email me directly, but you could also post it in that forum, and then other folks, can see that and jump in with things that are working in their area. And so feel free to pull these conversations out into the sort of the public, into the forum, and we can and have them there too, and then it will benefit other volunteers as well.
what's the easiest way to find that media forum?
So the easiest way is always to email me and say, Flannery, where's that thing that you said? But I will give you a link to it right now.
While you're doing that, Flannery, I also want to thank you for making time. I know it's 10 o'clock your time right now, and digging deep, and just really appreciate your help in the region.
It is my pleasure. It's all good. So the media forum is, if you go to the path in community, is the menu thing that says connect, and then there's a section that says forums, and then site-wide forums, and then you can choose the media one.
Flannery, I was going to ask you what time it was where you were, but I was afraid to.
Yeah.
10 o'clock. Oh my gosh.
Totally fine. My constitution is such that I am really a night owl. Like I don't get useful in the day until like 2 o'clock in the afternoon anyway. Fine with me.
So you're going to work well with us, Mountain West crew then.
Exactly. Yeah, we're in sync.
Totally. That's awesome.
All right.
Well, thank you so
all
much for your time.
And I will post this recording on community, and I'll send it out to you guys tomorrow too. So if there's anyone else in your chapters, or Bill, anyone else in the region that you think might want to check it out or connect with me, then we can share it around, and we'll keep everything moving.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Good
guys.
night, everyone. Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.